Now, moving on to, I mentioned about Micheál Donoghue, he got his league win with Dublin, the first league win of 2024. But by God, Dublin were lucky. 120-119, we beat Antrim by in Corrigan Park. This is an Antrim team that's been decimated by the amount of players that they've lost in the off-season. Like, losing players like Neil McManus just is absolutely massive to a team like that are trying to, build towards the future. But in this game, Antrim looked like they were heading towards victory after Conal Cunning's point in the dying minutes of the game. And then Seán Gallagher hits a shot for a point. It drops short, and the Antrim goalkeeper, Tiernan Smith, makes a mistake, and the ball ends up in the back of the net. And Dublin get out of Corrigan Park by the skin of their teeth with a win.
Yeah, look, the thing is just to get on the board for Dublin, to get that win on the board and go after Corrigan Park wasn't always going to be a walk in the park, really, because you know how tough Antrim are, despite the fact they've lost Neil McManus. Keelan Malloy, I know Neil McManus is Antrim Hurling, Mr. Antrim Hurling in many ways, but Keelan Malloy, I think, is an even bigger loss in midfield. He's the beating heart behind that team, and he's a huge loss. Joe McLaughlin's come in from Rory O'Cushendall this year. He only got 1 point today. But you have Colin Cunningham there. You still have some good players. Niall McKenna, who's on my podcast previously. You still have Owen Campbell there, Scott Walsh. So there's still some very good players in Antrim. So there was always going to be a tough test for Dublin. But I wanted to ask you this from a Dublin point of view, because a lot of League Sunday analysts are going on about Dublin. And I think Anthony Daly and I think it was Donald Cusack was on last week, correct me if I'm wrong. We're talking about Dublin and saying that since they got to a Leinster final playing against Kilkenny, O'Donnell goes off injured, and it kind of derails Dublin's whole season. Get close enough in some aspects to the Cork and that order of the quarter-final. Where do you think Dublin hurling is, Seamus? What's your aim? Is it to win a Leinster title? Is it to get to an All-Ireland semi-final? Because you've got to so many quarter-finals by this stage, and you've lost nearly every one. So, what's the aim?
Yeah, it's a great question. I genuinely feel like, as a Dublin hurling fan, I feel like it feels like we've plateaued a bit. It feels like we've hit a level and we just can't smash through that glass ceiling. Like, Dublin haven't got a win in ages that has made, I think the Galway win in 2019 was the last time that Dublin won a game where I was like, oh, okay, I'm with this now. I believe that we're going. But then we lost to Laois the next round. And Laois beat us, and they had won the John McDonough. That was one of the shocks of the year. So Dublin, for the last few years, it has felt a little bit like one step forward, one step back. Every time we played Kilkenny, we've just been beaten in every different way. We've lost to Kilkenny over the last 5 years in every way that you can lose a match. We've been annihilated. We've lost by a point. We've let them get a huge lead on us, and then we've pulled them back and fallen just short. Then we've had a huge lead on them in the year that we had Pat Gilroy and Anthony Cunningham in charge, and then we've blown the huge lead. I remember Liam Blanchfield getting that goal. Absolutely broke my heart. It's like Dublin right now, there is some good players coming through. There's some genuinely talented players like Diarmuid O'Dooling, like Seán Gallagher, that are coming through into the team. But Dublin's problem is that we can very, very rarely get our best 15 lads on the field at the same time. Like, already this year, no Rian McBride, he's not going to be there this year. No AJ Murphy, no Kevin Burke, no Cian O'Callaghan. And it does dishearten you. Last year we had all those lads, but we didn't have Chris Crummy. And it's just, you do miss those lads. Well, and it would love to see a full strength Dublin hurling team. And look, would we win the Leinster Championship? Probably not. Kilkenny and Galway are just that little bit ahead of us right now. But we could build towards something. Getting more minutes into the likes of Diarmuid O'Dooling, getting more minutes into the likes of AJ Murphy for me would have been crucial in this year, but AJ, of course, not part of the team. It's one of those things where Micheál Donoghue's come in. There's a good atmosphere around the Dublin team, from working around Dublin, from working around Parnell Park on the day of games. There is a good atmosphere around the camp. They put in some good performances in the Walsh Cup, beating Westmeath, beating Antrim. The Galway game was just a write-off. We just got hammered in that game. But yeah, what would success be this year? For me, success this year would be if we got out of the Leinster Championship for me, Dublin should aim to win Leinster. We should. It sounds stupid. It sounds like we haven't won Leinster now in over 10 years. But that should be our aim, right? Like, we don't want to just exist in the championship. We should try and win it. You know, I think a victory against Kilkenny would be massive for the psychology of the lads to believe that they can beat Kilkenny. It would be massive for them to do that. Get to a Leinster final. That would be, for me, a massive step forward. Get to a Leinster final and just go hell for leather at it. Just go hell for leather and see if we can get the win in a Leinster final, in a once-off game against Kilkenny or Galway or Wexford in Croke Park. That would be unbelievable success if we were to do that. If we get into the Final Four, that would be unbelievable as well. If we got into the Final Four by winning Leinster, that's an unbelievably successful year. Will we win the All-Ireland? No. Limerick are too strong. Clare are too strong. Clare annihilated us last year. We're not on their level, and I don't think we've closed that gap in a year. But yeah, like, astronomically successful year, I think it would be if we were to win Leinster and get into the semi-finals and give a good account of ourselves against a Clare or a Limerick.
What would G up Dublin in many ways, because I even go back to 2013 when they got to the semi-final, and if it wasn't for that lucky Patrick Horgan goal for Cork, Dublin could have been in the All-Ireland final that year. And even look at the Dublin team that year and the Dublin team that you described now, that Dublin team largely had their best 15 out in the field. The likes of David Trade there, the likes of Liam Rush, and all them players, and Anthony Daly to tie it all together as manager. You had Johnny Caffrey in midfield, I think was his name, midfield. Yeah, exceptional player. And like, that's the difficult thing with Dublin. Like, Liam Rush, I don't see his name on the sheet. He's not there apparently. No.
I don't think Rushy's retired, but I don't know. I haven't heard anything that tells me that he's coming back in. Look, if we had a team, you are right. If we had our starting 15 nailed on, every game you knew we're gonna have Owen O'Donnell there at 3. We're gonna have like Conor Burke there at 6. We're gonna have Chris Crummy, and we're gonna have Chris Crummy at midfield alongside Mark Rogan or Keane Boland. And then we're going to have Donald Burke at centre forward with Rian McBride and Danny Sutcliffe either side of him. Then we're going to have Keane O'Sullivan, Alex Considine and Ronan Hayes or someone like that inside. Or Sean Curry as well is another great option. And if you knew we're going to have that, you'd be able to work with that. 100% you'd be able to work with that to really squeeze good performances out of us. That championship in 2013, what is often forgotten is Dublin did it the hard way. Dublin beat Wexford, Kilkenny and Galway to win that Leinster championship. It wasn't like we, snuck by beating one of the smaller teams and then just caught Galway in the Leinster final. Like, we took the hard route and won the Leinster championship. So, like, obviously since then the Leinster championship has completely changed. We wouldn't just have to beat Kilkenny once. We probably have to beat them twice. Like, that type of thing to win the Leinster championship. But it is, you're right. It's one of those things where Dublin just has a massive issue with losing players to the football. Like Lee Gannon, Cormac Costello, they've all picked football when they were superb hurlers. And like, they were genuinely being touted as the next big things to emerge for the hurlers. And then they went and played football. And it's a sad reality of that's just what it's like in Dublin. People do choose the football because where Dublin are right now, if you are a brilliant, talented dual star and you're guaranteed minutes for one team, so you're guaranteed minutes for both teams. Dublin, you're guaranteed that the minute you go into that team, you have a pretty good chance of potentially winning an All-Ireland title. If you go in with the hurlers, you probably won't right now. And that's why, like, for example, with Lee Gannon, he's a club mate of mine. His decision was, do you go in with the hurlers and, you will be one of the main players, but Dublin probably won't, win the All-Ireland? Or do you go in with the footballers where you will start and you probably will? And he did. So I can't really blame him for making that decision, can I? And that right there is one of the main issues.
And even look at, there's tons of examples of this, and you make a very good point there. Kieran Kilkenny is another one. Con O'Callaghan is another one. And another recent example, and he's on the bench for the footballers, Luke Swan.
Yeah.
Very good. It's obvious. I don't know why I'm asking why, because it is obvious why he's choosing football, because he's going to get a Celtic cross there. He's
Yeah.
not in her. The closest Dublin got was that game in 2013 against Cork. And
Yeah.
if it was ifs, buts, and maybes, if Ryan O'Dwyer didn't get sent off, if Patrick Horgan didn't flick it ahead of Gary Maguire, all them ifs and buts and maybes. If Dublin got over the line that day, I think he could have had a Celtic cross, a Liam McCarthy Cup here now. I genuinely think so. Because he would have match clear in terms of fitness and all that. And what was noticeable about that 2013 year as well, the fans got behind Dublin that year. The hill was rocking for that game against Cork. Really was. So that's another thing, maybe the fans to get behind Dublin, to get behind this team as well. And what I will say in Leinster, other than Galway and Kilkenny, Wexford are beatable. Carlow are beatable. Antrim, I know he's struggled against them, but they are beatable. But before we leave this game, actually, Seamus, Donald Burke, what's the situation there? He's definitely playing this year, is he?
Yes, he is. Donald's just injured. He's at all the games. Like, he's there in the half zip watching the team, supporting them. He will play this year, no question about it. And I can't wait till he does come back in, because Donald Burke is, I think, one of the best hurlers in the country. Like, genuinely, I think he's one of the best. I don't mince those words. Like, I think genuinely, when you see some of the highlight scores that Donald Burke has got, he's literally, his radar is unbelievable. Like, if you let Donald Burke shoot, most likely he will put it over the bar. He's brilliant. And we need to get him back in there. Like, we haven't really seen him since his injury against Clare in last year's championship. We need to get him back, because he's an outstanding hurler, and we can build that team around him. You are right. The 2013 game sticks out. Because that year, like, the hill was packed, not just for the Cork game, but it was packed for the Leinster games against Galway, against Kilkenny, whereas, the last games that Dublin the Hurlers played, it was 9,000 were at the Galway game. Like, it's not something that we've managed to quite capture and really, really make. Like, 2013 could have been a breakthrough year, where it could have felt like the start of something. Instead, it was a bit of a, if we're looking back, a bit of a flash in the pan, if we're brutally honest. So it's like look back on as like, oh, remember Dublin were good for that year. When it should be, realistically, it should be, remember when Dublin exploded onto the scene and we haven't been able to get rid of them since. But instead, like, a lot of that potential was kind of lost. And look, Dalo had an amazing connection with the fans, and personally, like, I was heartbroken when Dalo left, because you could tell he really, really cared about that Dublin job. You could tell he really cared about the team and about the fans and that. And his charisma did draw people in, and everybody wanted to be part of it. And it was a pleasure to witness it, to be honest. And speaking to a few of the lads like Ryan O'Dwyer and Gary Maguire and everything that I've been privileged to meet, they were a really good group of lads, lovely, lovely blokes, and then leaders in that team. Like, Johnny McCaffrey was an absolute warrior. Liam Rush, like, they were just fantastic. And look, it wasn't to be. And I hope that we can take, steps on that road again. Like, as I said, the youngsters that we got now, the Diarmaid O'Doulings, Brian Sheehy's another one that, again, he looked tailor-made for that Dublin team. And now he's not even playing hurling for Crokes. He was only playing football for Crokes this year. It's one of those where, we do have some good players coming through. And I hope that Donoghue is the right man to mould us into a team that maybe if we can win Leinster this year, that'll be a massive, massive step forward for Dublin hurling. No question about it.